businesses were looking for a disruptive approach. If you can't beat them apples to apples, we need to find a better way, and that is using digital on-demand solutions like 3D printing.
Welcome back to another episode of Tank Talks. I'm your host, Matt Cohen. On this week's episode, we're diving into the world of additive manufacturing and 3D printing, a sector that is not just shaping the future, but redefining the present, especially in the face of global supply chain disruptions. Our guest today is someone who epitomizes the spirit of innovation and resilience. He's scrappy, gritty, unrelenting, and utterly obsessed with his vision, a true entrepreneur in every sense. I'm thrilled to have Mitch Debora, the CEO and co-founder of Mosaic Manufacturing. Mitch co-founded Mosaic Manufacturing back in 2014 with a bold vision to revolutionize the manufacturing industry through advanced 3D printing technologies. Fast forward to today, and he's leading the charge in helping businesses navigate supply chain headaches, thanks in large part to the challenges posed by COVID-19. In this week's episode, we discuss how Mitch is 3D printing his way out of supply chain issues, the inspiration behind Mosaic's groundbreaking technology, and how their latest innovation, their array system, is making continuous automated production a reality. Now let's jump into the tank for this week's episode with Mitch Debora from Mosaic Manufacturing. Thanks for joining us in the tank today, Mitch.
Thanks for having me.
You know, Mitch, you are what I believe is the definition of a scrappy, gritty, unrelenting, and vision-obsessed founder. And I'm so excited for our listeners to hear your story. But before we jump right in, can you give our audience a brief background on yourself, where you grew up, your early career path, and how you became an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. So I grew up in just north of Toronto in Thornhill, went to Queen's engineering, did materials and mechanical engineering, and that was the career path I was going down. And I never was one of those people who, needed to be an entrepreneur, but I kind of fell into it. I joined a startup incubator at Queen's through the DDQIC, met the most incredible co-founders. We took on a really ambitious problem, looked at it from the perspective of a way to really grow our skills. And 10 years later, we just celebrated our decade birthday, and we're just as excited to be waking up every morning to build the future as we were back then. So really, Mosaic's been my entire career at this point, and I feel really, really grateful.
So your first and only job is still your current job, which is pretty remarkable. I mean, tell us about those early ideas that you guys spitballed on, and how did you land on the problem you're solving 10 years later?
Yeah, so I feel really fortunate that it was one of those stories where we just lived the problem and we experienced it ourselves. So I, super geeky. I bought a 3D printer when they became affordable in like 2012. I started a quick website, was printing things for professors and students and automotive companies near Kingston. And it was really clear to me right away that 3D printing would disrupt manufacturing. It maybe wasn't perfectly evident as to how and how long it would take, but that was clear. Joined that incubator at Queen's, told who became my co-founders about this. And as we considered a few different problems to solve, we just all really became pretty obsessed with the 3D printing problem and how to solve that. And so, early days was all about 3D printing disrupting manufacturing. And we identified that one of the biggest gaps was that at the time, the output of the 3D printers was really limited. It was single color, single material. And so the initial mission of the company was to take an Intel approach to become the best at a single stack, solve the multicolor, multi-material output so that the output of the printers was more valuable, and then it could be applied to more manufacturing applications. And that was where things got started.
Okay, so tell us about some of those quirky things that you built for like the automotive companies out of Kingston. Like, what were some of the most random things people asked you to build for them, and I guess paid for through the website initially?
It was all over the place because 3D printing is a manufacturing technology, right? So it's a horizontal. So one day I was getting a request for an eye washing station for a plant. The next day it was a device to control electrodes going into the brain of a rat for research. The next day it was somebody requesting parts of a shotgun, which I had to say no to. But you name it, this was really a microcosm for the flexibility of additive manufacturing or 3D printing as a supply chain solution and a way to really make anything on shore.
That's amazing. And so obviously this onshoring or re-onshoring of manufacturing parts was something that you had an idea of, but it really took some time for the rest of the market to believe in it. What were some of the problems that you had to overcome around this kind of re-onshoring of the manufacturing supply chain? And how did Mosaic try to think about solving it piece by piece?
What's really interesting here is we were really fortunate to have stumbled into this again because we had thousands of products in the market from that initial mission of overcoming multicolor, multi-material. We started to see our own customers grapple with supply chain issues. And that's the highest level issue here, is that if you're a business who makes something, all of the parts that go into that thing you make need to be sourced because of the globalization that's happened kind of since the 80s. It's usually coming from Asia, which means very long lead times, very low flexibility if you want to change something. And it's become incredibly evident to people now how vulnerable it is, whether it be geopolitical conflict, a weather event, a ship that gets, lodged in a canal. When you can't get even one of the parts, your manufacturing is halted. And this is a really major supply chain risk for companies that will cripple them. So that's the high level problem that we saw. Supply chain resilience was threatened more than ever. And then you go one level deeper, and our thesis was, okay, 3D printing or additive manufacturing, that's the solution. But that was where there was also major problems. Anyone who knew 3D printing back then, it was slow, it wasn't scalable, it was expensive, and it wasn't easy to be integrated. And so that was our focus as a company, applying automation, AI, really advanced software to bring down the cost and bring up the scalability so that we can help marry this technology with supply chain problems to give our customers a solution. So you can kind of see there's the two levels.
Yeah, people always know that technology is a deflationary solution to a lot of the world's problems.
Yes.
Look at the way we pay for, TVs today. They cost less than, maybe a McDonald's Happy Meal some places. What is the cost breakdown for additive manufacturing, and where did it start from and where has it gone to?
So there's really four categories, and our customers love that we can work closely with them to go through this. So the top is usually labor, right? So you got to think about a 3D printer almost like in the cooking world, like a microwave oven. Like you got to go over, open the door, put something in, warm it up, take it out, do the next one. You would never use a microwave to feed a wedding level of volume, and that's kind of a good metaphor for how 3D printing was struggling in supply chain. So number one, labor. Number two, material. So the thing you're actually printing. Number three is your overhead. And then number four is so like electricity, et cetera. Number four is the depreciation of the equipment. So you amortize over 5 years the cost of the equipment. And because in the early days, the market was all about prototyping, the business model was charge a ton for the printer, charge a ton for the material, because you were printing ones and twos, and the value was so high that early businesses were able to capture that value. But that does not work for supply chain. In manufacturing, there's the 3 C's, right? Cost, cost, cost. When you have an inherently expensive system, it makes inherently expensive parts. So we flip that on its head. We approach this from the ground up to solve all four of those problems. So we made a really cost-effective system. We brought down material costs through bulk purchasing and ordering and shipping directly to our customers. And one of the biggest things that our customers love is we applied automation. So instead of a person going and loading those plates into the microwave oven, we have a robot that does it. And instead of one microwave or printer, we've got many of them in parallel. And so that parallelization, automation, cost control has really solved that problem compared to the early prototyping world where it was all about ones and twos and it was really expensive.
Right. So the prototyping world and all that sort of ones and twos was where we were until something happened called COVID. How did COVID and the pandemic really change the urgency and the resiliency of people thinking about what they needed from their supply chains? And how did that accelerate Mosaic's growth?
Yeah, so I think that supply chain risk went from one of those line items on a risk register at every executive meeting, and then it became very real because it became the most burning business problem. Again, didn't matter what you made, from medical equipment to consumer goods to consumer electronics. You're missing one part, whether it be a chip or a component, your line was down, your revenue was down, right? So it became a major strategic priority for businesses to de-risk their supply chain. And in most cases, that means localization. And then, following from that, it'd be, okay, how do we do this locally? We can't compete with China by copying and pasting China. We don't have the labor resources. We don't have even the ecosystem that in China supports manufacturing. And so businesses were looking for a disruptive approach, right? If you can't beat them apples to apples, we need to find a better way. And that is using digital on-demand solutions like 3D printing. And so that was really the fuel, because then businesses are coming to us saying, all right, we've decided to use additive, but we need scale, we need cost control. And our array system, which is the way we packaged all that value I spoke about before, we're able to roll that into our customers' factories. And sometimes within days, they were switching from a 6-month global supply chain to a 6-hour supply chain that was contained to their plant.
Unbelievable. I mean, give us some anecdotal stories of like what kind of products were you building, who was calling you, or what industries were they in, and what were some of the craziest things you actually solved for them in terms of the products you built?
Yeah, we're really lucky. There's again, manufacturing is a horizontal, so it touches almost every space. And so I'll give you maybe different ends of the spectrum. On one side is like typical, more industrial product manufacturing at a contract manufacturing level. So think medical equipment. And one of our customers, they're making a product. Bill of materials had hundreds of parts, and they were missing literally a plastic washer, like a spacer. And the washer was 10 cents, but for them, the washer was, 100 grand a week that they were losing. And so using the array on site, they were able to circumvent that multi-month supply chain to get those parts, make them the same day, and get back up and get their line back up and running. And then, of course, that inspired them to start taking more and more parts of that bill of materials and saying, why are we sourcing this through a 6-month supply chain in the first place? Let's just digitize all of this and do it on array. Complete other end of the spectrum. In the world of textiles, footwear, consumer apparel, I'm unfortunately not able to share the specific brands, but when people think 3D printing, they usually think like hard plastic. But something that we've really challenged is the ability to print soft goods, wearables, fabric-like materials. And that's really opened up some pretty key verticals for us to be able to add value, especially leveraging that personalization and customization of the 3D printing process.
It's funny. I kind of think about like when you get an IKEA package delivered and is missing that one bolt or washer and the whole thing just doesn't work. Now, IKEA things are like $150, not $100,000 medical machine equipment. But in similar veins, it's very frustrating. You've made it all the way to the end of this, physical good being set up and ready to be used, and you're missing that one part. And that's where the additive manufacturing process comes in. And your latest innovation, the array system, is a pretty significant advancement compared to the rest of the 3D printing market. Can you explain sort of how it works and what makes it so different compared to the competitors in the market out there?
There's two components to what makes it different. The first was our really obsessive first principles focus on the manufacturing challenges around cost and scalability. So, applying robotics and automation to the process, parallelizing the process, having an incredible software platform that connects right into the factory, we really elevated to a high volume additive platform. But the second is what we call the solutions approach. I think we see this in a lot of emerging industries and new categories where a compelling business case and compelling technology is not enough for transformation to happen. You need to marry them together. You need that integrations team. And what we see is that often the businesses with these compelling big supply chain problems where our solution can solve them, they're lacking the team who's an expert in automation implementation. So we built out a solutions group. We partner with our customers, help them get up and running as fast as possible, and sort of ensure that they are successful. So those two pieces together were critical for us to have really achieved the success that we've been able to when defining this new category of on-demand local production with additive.
It reminds me of the stories you hear about how Tesla produces every single thing in-house. Obviously a lot of the parts they have are pretty special to the products they're building, and they can't wait for some supply chain to make those products overseas. I've heard that you work with some of the Fortune 10s, like top 10 companies in the world. And can you give us examples of some of the things that they're getting value out of from some of the ways in which your systems help them not rely on global supply chains and fix little things that have huge impacts on their, manufacturing processes?
One of the major themes that we're seeing, when it comes to Fortune 10s or more broadly Fortune 500s, at the scale that they're operating, they are going through, sometimes hundreds of thousands of parts in their supply chain just to support their own operations, never mind the products that they're shipping to customers. So if you think about a CPG brand, you might think about the end product that makes its way to a store shelf, but think about the engine behind that, dispatching, fulfilling, sorting. When a factory is down, it's not about the value of a part. It's about that, 100 grand an hour of value that they're losing. And it's really important for them to get that part so that their line can be back up and running, whether it be a sensor cover, a conveyor belt roller, a part of a truck, you name it. And that presents a really big issue for them because they're trying to maintain the supply chains for thousands of parts from vendors who might be out of business in other parts of the world. So now what they're doing with our platform, they're taking those tens of thousands of parts, they're putting them into digital inventory up in the cloud. So the moment they need something, it can be vended in their factory on our delivery system array. And they're getting the part only when they need it, right where they need it. And again, having that part can be the difference between 100 grand per hour down and being up. So that's one of the ways, this mission critical spare part problem that we're solving for these customers. And I think that's a problem set that expands well beyond the Fortune 500s, and that we're excited to kind of expand down market to even small businesses.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the Fortune 10s, you're talking about Microsoft, Tesla, Amazon. These all have warehouses, data centers, Nvidia. They have physical places that need to continue to maintain operations to keep their businesses, establishing themselves as the leaders. And so you have a very small insertion into their, support staff, but you have a huge impact on whether or not they can succeed and continue moving forward because they need these small bits and pieces to keep everything kind of tied together, no pun intended. But I guess like the thing that I have heard is that you are obviously invested in like the medical devices space, the machinery space, the automation. Are there any industries you're currently not in that you hope to be in the future? And if so, why?
So, the way that we think about the future, inevitably we have customers in, dozens, and soon it'll be hundreds of different verticals. And that's great that we can add value and we can kind of watch what's happening. But we do expect that there's going to be a few specific verticals where we're going to be able to go much deeper in sort of some of these killer applications. And while I think we've already discovered several of them, the one I mentioned in textiles and on-demand spare parts, we are spinning up a group who's going to really focus on exploring more of those and finding the ones where we can just add the most value to solve our customers' biggest supply chain issues. So I can't say the specific ones yet, but I can say that it's very likely that the areas where we will win the biggest and add the most value are yet to be discovered. I think they're enabled by our technology, but we're keeping a very open mind. When you're the frontier leading a company in a new category, I think you often need to balance not distracting yourselves with taking on too much and diluting, but also keeping an open mind, being nimble to jump on the opportunities that you enable.
You've been at this for 10 years, as you mentioned, Mitch. There's obviously been a lot of ups and a lot of downs. Can you tell our audience a little bit about those early years when maybe the timing didn't feel right or the investors didn't necessarily feel like there was a huge, market tailwind towards manufacturing and 3D printing and how you kind of, stayed alive?
Yeah, sometimes we felt like we were, those founders who felt like we understood the problem, but other people didn't. We couldn't, get that response. And part of it was the fluency around the problem set. So we talked about COVID before. COVID made supply chains become a dinner table conversation because it started to impact all of us, right? So I think that was one of the things. Maybe we were a little before our time, and I'm really proud of what the team did. We found a niche that we were able to sell product into. So we actually, in the first 5 years, became a profitable company, shipping thousands and thousands of products, solving that multicolor, multi-material, much smaller niche 3D printing problem. But that created an incredible foundation, relationships, team, technology, IP, for us to then solve this much bigger supply chain problem. But yeah, Matt, I think that's the biggest one, was us believing in a vision that I think the market was a bit too early to understand. But I think things have certainly shifted, and I'm fortunate the position that we're in today.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely paved the way for some of the benefits you're seeing now for the market. But like you said, like supply chains became part of the dinner conversation. There's another thing that's becoming part of the dinner conversation these days, which is obviously AI. Everyone in the world is talking about it, but you've been obviously thinking about its benefits with machine learning and AI impact on manufacturing for quite some time. How is today's technology helping you accelerate some of the adoption of what you guys have been able to do? And what sort of impacts is AI happening on your product development?
Operationally, I think we have a good outlook on leveraging tools from the early ChatGPT to kind of save some time to using different design tools and any way that we can leverage each of our own day to get more out of it. But I think really interestingly at the tech stack level as well, I mentioned one of the biggest cost drivers for additive manufacturing on shore is labor. And through robotics, we solved a lot of those labor and monotonous, going in at 3 a.m. to do something problems. But there's also this monitoring problem. Anyone who's used a printer before knows that you generally kind of have to watch it. And so using cameras and other sensors, we've built out a tech stack that's able to use AI to really reduce the amount of human intervention needed. And that's another way that we can drive down cost, drive up the usability in the markets that we can benefit. And that's something that we're going to continue to invest in.
So it's from a labor perspective, you're saying AI can take on a lot of that monitoring work, essentially.
That's right.
And so give us some examples of sort of how customers are interacting with the software and the hardware, along with some of like the materials that you're also supplying to them. Like, how does that all tie together?
Again, I think there's two major components here. There's the digital inventory platform. That's the software. It helps manage the factory, but it also stores all of those parts. So the metaphor I love here is, instead of storing the parts physically on a shelf, like a dusty shelf in a warehouse that you're paying for, that's taking up the surface of the earth, Instead, those parts are stored in the cloud, taking up basically no space. And then the second half of what we do is the on-demand part vending. So imagine this like magical vending machine that can just make any part that you need on demand. That's what we call Array. It's like the shelf is printing the parts when you need them. And for that, we're supplying, the vending system, the materials, service, everything the customer needs to be successful. So those two together form that offering that's helping our customers, really transcend the old way of doing things. Using the letter mail analogy, typical supply chains are kind of like sending a letter in the mail. It's got to travel a long way, pass many of hands, takes weeks. Whereas we are helping people email things. So it's not FedEx, it's the cloud delivering them. And it really is disruptive. It's not incremental. It's really changing the outlook that businesses have on supply chain and how they make decisions now that they don't need to forecast 6 to 9 months in advance and risk massive amounts of inventory that need to be dumped.
So you obviously have the physical machine that sits in the warehouse, taking up space. You have the, I assume like CAD or designs sitting in the cloud, not taking up space, but you also have materials, right? Like the printing materials that do take up space. How have you been able to figure out how to get the materials, the right kind of materials at the right time for when your customers need them? And are they storing all of them on site, or is it sort of, a little bit more subscription style?
Yeah. So, our job is to make sure that our customer has the material they need when they need it, like you said. And so one of the models we use is bulk ordering. We can save our customers a ton and it's much better for the environment to go directly from where the filament is produced to our customer's factory, not going to a warehouse in between and having all these extra legs of shipping. Generally, because our customers are in production, they have a good forecast of what they might need. And then you've got that kind of non-fungibility of the fact that a filament, say, for example, ABS, that can sit there only until it needs to be turned into, whether it be an air manifold, a cable carrier, an internal bracket for a medical product. It can be turned into a specific good where that value is added only when it's needed. So instead of storing thousands of SKUs on shelves, we reduce that to only a couple SKUs, which is the material, making it much easier to forecast and to turn over that inventory. So that's how we think about the consumables. And frankly, that's actually been a really successful part of the business. We haven't had too many issues there.
That's incredible. Have you ever calculated or your customers shared with you some of the ROI that you've been able to generate from a cost savings perspective?
They have, yeah. We're really fortunate to work closely with our customers who are pretty forward thinking. So sometimes it's as simple as a process change, like they went from something that someone was doing a different way down the road and now they're doing it on site. And you could see like a 20-30% cost savings just based on the automation of Array. But what's, I think, a lot more interesting from an economic and environmental perspective is when our customers zoom out and they think, all right, I was ordering this plastic component from China. We cut the mold. How much steel did we use? When we mold the parts and ship them around the world, how many kilograms or actually tons of CO2 were emitted to get it here? What was the total cost of that journey if we amortize that over a part cost? And then you look at Array, where instead of the parts arriving in a box, again, that was ordered 6 to 9 months in advance, the parts arrive in the factory in a box right when they're needed, with only the material needed, much lower energy, much lower material. It can be 300, 400, 500% savings on a per part basis from a cost perspective, and then from an environmental perspective, a fraction of the emissions as well. So I think that with such a big delta, that's a great driver for us to grow adoption. And I think that's was really helpful in us being able to close the financing recently to help grow and sort of get into more factories.
Mitch, you've mentioned the impact that you're having on the environment several times now. And I want to talk to you about some of the sustainability goals that you're achieving. I feel like Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions companies have no connection to what you are actually doing on the ground level. How is additive manufacturing using Mosaic system reducing environmental impacts compared to some of the traditional methods out there?
So the way we're benefiting the environmental impact of manufacturing is ultimately, by reshaping the supply chain. So instead of parts, being cut from, a mold being cut from a ton of steel, throwing plastic into it, shipping that across the planet, and this happening for every single part going into every product, the carbon toll in that is pretty high. In our case, we're making the part right where it's needed, only when it's needed, using only the material needed. And so the delta there in terms of material used, energy used, emissions from transport gets cut significantly. So that's really how our customers are calculating and able to achieve pretty significant benefits in terms of the emission reduction of using array.
That's incredible, Mitch. I mean, I think the other interesting thing that people are hearing about Mosaic is that you are really focused on helping build out the Canadian-based infrastructure plans. We have obviously a lot of aging infrastructure across this country and across North America. How do you think, 3D printers and what you're doing with Mosaic can help change the course of the way that infrastructure is being built out in Canada?
That comes to the core benefits of 3D printing or additive manufacturing. It's that flexibility. It's, the bespoke solutions, at least in the world of infrastructure, that you need where you need it. And so we're seeing now, we're at this point where there's such proliferation at the industrial level and at the small business level of using additive in everyday problem solving. And that's kind of the market that's tangential to ours. We're really focused on the manufacturing and scalable side, but I don't want to underplay the incredible sort of mature state that the more traditional small business infrastructure world has achieved using additive to solve their everyday problems. It's the ones and twos, but it's incredibly powerful and saves the taxpayers a lot as well.
We don't always have a 3D printing expert here. I got to ask, have you been in a 3D printed home before? And what's it like?
I'll be honest, I actually have not been in a 3D printed home yet, but there's some amazing companies, including some in Canada, that are working on this, and that'll be maybe a bucket list item for the next year.
Okay, and for all the parents out there who are focused on STEM for their kids, science, technology, education, math, who want to get into 3D printing, what do you suggest being a young parent yourself?
I think a printer is an incredible tool to help inspire kids into STEM. A decade ago it was learn to code. I think that's still true, but I think spending a few $100 on a printer so that your child can learn the process of design, iteration, innovation, really compelling. I wish I had that when I was a kid, and definitely something that I will buy my kids.
What was the first printer you bought yourself?
The first printer I bought, it was my first Instagram post actually ever. Hilariously, it's still there. It was the box of my first printer was a Maker Gear M2 by a company in Ohio that made printers in America, and I had it for 5 years, paid for the printer many times, and I think that really is what inspired me to become really focused on this space.
It's so incredible. I feel like, it's kind of like how drones came out early on, and I bought the first drone that came out in the second one, and they have gotten better and smaller and way more capable. And what kids can do with them now with FPV and stuff, I feel like 3D printers have evolved even more still from that as well, right?
They have. They've gotten, safer, more cost effective, easier to use, and it's that accessibility piece, like you mentioned with drones, with coding, and it's at that point where it's crazy to think that even a decade and a half ago, printers were locked up behind $100,000 price tags. Now we're talking a few $100 off Amazon. That accessibility piece is so incredible, and frankly, I think that is going to be one of the biggest drivers for us achieving our vision in the future. Is that you now have millions of students every year learning about this technology, more than that, using it at home. And so we're no longer preaching that, additive is a powerful technology. It's like more people than not know that, and the way it's being applied to supply chain solutions, that's kind of the piece where we're adding value. But I think the general sentiment and understanding of the power of additive and the struggles with current supply chain is making an incredible recipe for growth.
You have so many, obviously, amazing employees, but I'm sure you get a lot of intern applications and like recent grads looking to come work for you guys. You must have a hall of fame of all the things you guys have printed in the office. What are some of the cool, fun gadgets people have built inside the office that you guys have like on your shelves?
Oh man, there are hundreds and hundreds, from people working on, personal projects at home, to things for the company. There's a few themes I think people love, like the action figures. We've got the Pokemon everywhere, and sort of people bringing some of those hobbies to life. There's a big like World of Warcraft and gaming community at Mosaic that will print a lot of these and actually use them. There's the pragmatic things, like if you were to walk around my house, it'd be subtle, but you'd find like the coat hooks, you'd find the accessories and organizers and drawers, the lamps, some of the shoes. It's really becoming quite pervasive.
Wait, shoes? What do you mean shoes?
Shoes. I mean, you may know this, but Adidas actually is printing parts of I think it's the Adidas 4D, and there's a few other companies that we're working with that are printing shoes using additive as well. So it's really becoming everywhere around us, and we're no longer obsessed with the hype of, oh, that was 3D printed. It's more just like, I wanted a great product, and it so happens that 3D printing was used in the manufacturing. So that's the era that we're moving towards.
Are you wearing the shoes that Adidas built or that you manufactured on your feet right now?
Not right now, but if they were here, I'd show them to you.
You've worn them in the wild though.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. Like you just wouldn't notice. They just look like shoes. They
I
have
wouldn't even notice the difference.
the Adidas ones have a really unique design in terms of the lattice structure, but some of the shoes, yeah, you'd look at them and they just say it looks like a running shoe, but when you put it on, you feel the customization, the comfort, the perfect fit. Again, that value that was brought to the manufacturing through additive instead of it being made, by the hundreds of thousands somewhere else.
I honestly think about obviously how much the Jetsons cartoon show has become proven in real life more and more as we get through this, crazy time change or time we're living in. But like 3D printing is at the core of it. It's like you think of something and you just, tell your AI agent to print it in the house and automatically you have it. Like how disruptive is that?
It's wild. Like I think as society, we were really, really obsessed with the digital transformation of data around us, right? Everything becoming personalized and sort of bespoke. But if you think about it, everything you are looking at, everything around you, it's a thing. It needed to be made somewhere. And so, as we move into this next era, it's about that customization and hyper personalization of the things around you. And that's actually why our vision at Mosaic is effectively a future where the things that we need are made sustainably and onshore around the corner. It might be a 10, 20-year goal, but that's what we're driving towards, sort of taking back that means of production and building that resiliency as a country. It's happened digitally, but now it's time to do it for the physical things around us.
I mean, it's fantastic to obviously watch your journey from afar, Mitch, but it's culminated now in a growth equity financing round of $28 million raised by Idealist Capital, who led the round, in Mosaic, and participation from some other amazing investors. Can you tell us a little bit about that financing process? How do you plan on using the funds, and what kind of impacts do you think it will have on Mosaic's future?
Yeah. So for us, we've taken a really sustainable approach to growth. But given the signals that we were seeing for the way that our customers were adopting our solutions for supply chain innovation, it was really clear that it was the right moment where capital was really holding us back. So we went to market. We were able to find an incredible partner in Idealist. They have a really sustainable focused mindset, not only in terms of supporting businesses that help reduce carbon emissions, but also building a healthy business, not throwing money at things at all costs, but really being a partner in building an incredible company. So really fortunate to have them around the table. The capital for us is really about growth. We spent 10 years building the IP, the technology, bringing it to market, finding product market fit. Now it's about getting into more factories. So really scaling up and right sizing our commercial teams, continuing to invest in innovation and developing our products, but getting into the first 1,000 factory or the next 1,000 factories is sort of the mission here. And with the capital, we can expand the teams, build our senior leadership team to help us really expand south of the border. And it's really fortunate. Most businesses don't get to this place, and fortunate to be in this place and have an exciting outlook ahead of us.
I know it's unbelievable, Mitch. Super excited for you guys in the future. How can our listeners stay up to date on your journey and follow the company alongside you?
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. Follow the company on LinkedIn. We try and share about the journey as we go, and keep an eye out. Some of the applications that we're developing, we're not able to talk about publicly yet, but I think they're on track to certainly define new categories, and will be exciting things to keep an eye out for. So subscribe to our mailing list and follow on LinkedIn.
Yeah, your blog's amazing and a lot of cool stuff in there that I found. So thanks for putting that together. Before we wrap things up, we always ask our guests for their fast favorites. So first off, your favorite podcast.
How I Built This, Guy Raz.
Any particular ones that you're obsessed with?
Oh man, I love the stories of founders who kind of were working on a side hustle, and then it blew up to the point where they sort of developed like dynasties. Can't think of any specific ones, but those are my favorite kind of.
I think Stacy's Chips was a great one, who was selling like the leftover chips from her taco stand. And then she ends up like selling the business for 100 million. That was a great one.
Yep.
Next is your favorite newsletter or blog?
Uncharacteristically, I'm actually not a blog or newsletter guy, so that's I'll pass on that one.
So you can plug your Mosaic blog.
Yeah, the Mosaic blog. You can learn a lot about the future of advanced manufacturing and supply chain. So check it out.
There you go. Next is your favorite tech gadget. I have what this might be.
Yeah. So believe it or not, the business kind of stole my hobby, but it's still my hobby. So 3D printing at home, you'll find me in my spare time, innovating, designing, printing. So that's still my favorite tech gadget.
I got to come over and see all the crazy stuff you have in your house soon. Next is your favorite new trend.
I think this is kind of kind of funny, but the betting culture now and how everything is becoming bettable. Just kind of on a lighter note, I think that's a really interesting trend, and how that is being used as a data set to predict things into the future. I'm keeping my eye on that one.
It's interesting though. I assume you're referring to poly market and some of these things regarding like the elections and all these upcoming, geopolitical events and stuff.
Yeah.
I think the problem though with that is by using it as a data point, you're actually having the incentive of people to put capital behind bets to skew the outcomes because it's got the signal and noise around it, right? So it's like, hey, if everyone thinks that this is going to be the outcome, more people will self-fulfill on thinking that as well, and then more bets will go that direction. So I don't know if it's necessarily realistic to the underlying data, but more about the betting data.
Same page.
Next is your favorite book.
Favorite book, The Age of Spiritual Machines by Ray Kurzweil.
That makes a lot of sense. And for our listeners who don't know about the book, can you give us a quick TLDR?
Yeah, it kind of explores some of these interesting. I remember one of the things it explores is, okay, you've got a person and you amputate their arm with a digital arm, and then you replace their kidney, and then you replace their brain. And at what point along the way did they switch from being a human to being a machine? It explores some of these topics, and Ray has gone on to be the inventor of some of the most incredible technology. He was leading tech at Google, and his predictions have been incredibly accurate, even looking a couple decades out. So if you haven't read it, I'd recommend it.
If people don't know who he is, he's the futurist, right? Basically, for what Google always plays to do.
Yes.
And next, and last but not least, is your favorite life lesson.
This was instilled in us right when we started the company, and I think it's a lesson in humility in that, you know what you know what you don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. And that last one is the hardest. And the way to overcome it is to remain humble, to remember to ask questions, and surround yourself with people who are smarter, better than you in every way. So that's what I like to tell most entrepreneurs.
Oh, fantastic advice, and so impressive of what you built with the team at Mosaic, Mitch, over the last 10 years. Here's to the next 100 years of changing the supply chain across the world. Mitch Debora, co-founder and CEO of Mosaic Manufacturing.
Thanks, Matt.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tank Talks. We hope you found today's conversation as insightful as we did. If you're enjoying the show, we've got 3 quick things to ask of you. First, hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or YouTube. Next, follow us and stay up to date on upcoming episodes and behind-the-scenes content on social media with Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And lastly, share the love. If you found value in today's episode, share with a friend or colleague who'd benefit too. Your support helps us bring in more amazing guests and keeps the Tank Talks engine running. That's it for today. Until next time, keep disrupting and innovating.